2,000 years ago, at the southern edge of Spain, Roman sailors carved a warning into the rock beside the sea, non terre plus ultra. No land lies beyond this point. They believed this was the end of the world. They were wrong. And the story of how wrong they were is the story of Spain itself. This is the complete history of Spain. Not the flamenco, the siesta, or the sunburned coastlines you've seen in travel videos. This is the story of a land invaded 7 times, erased and rebuilt, that briefly ruled more of the earth than any power before it, and then tore itself apart from the inside. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why a nation that once believed it stood at the edge of nothing became the country that redrew the map of everything. Let's begin where Rome thought the world ended. Rome didn't just settle Spain, Rome bled for it. The conquest of Hispania took nearly 2 centuries, longer than almost any other Roman campaign. Roads, aqueducts, and cities rose across the peninsula, and Hispania became one of Rome's most valuable provinces. In fact, 2 of Rome's most powerful emperors, Trajan and Hadrian, were both born in the Hispanian city of Italica. A land Rome had once spent 200 years fighting to conquer went on to produce the men who ruled the entire empire. Then Rome collapsed, and into that vacuum came the Visigoths, a Germanic people who built a kingdom centred on Toledo, blending Roman law with their own warrior culture. For nearly 3 centuries, this Visigothic kingdom held together, until, in the year 711, everything changed in a single battle. An Umayyad force, led by the commander Tariq ibn Ziyad, crossed from North Africa and met the Visigothic king Roderick at the Battle of Guadalete. Roderick was killed, his army collapsed, and within a few short years nearly the entire Iberian Peninsula fell under Islamic rule. A kingdom that had stood for generations disappeared in less time than it takes to build a single cathedral. But the conquerors didn't erase what they found. They built something almost no one expected, a civilization that would make Spain the intellectual centre of Western Europe. What happened next didn't just change Spain, it changed the direction of medieval history itself. While much of medieval Europe struggled through what is often called the Dark Ages, something extraordinary was happening in the south of Spain. Under Islamic rule, the city of Córdoba grew into one of the largest and most advanced cities on earth, with paved streets, public libraries holding hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, and running water, at a time when most of Europe had none of it. At night, oil lamps lit Córdoba's streets for miles. Visitors arriving from northern Europe, where cities went completely dark after sunset, described walking through it after dark as something almost otherworldly, a city that simply refused to stop functioning when the sun went down. This land, known as Al-Andalus, became a rare meeting point of Muslim, Jewish and Christian scholars. Greek philosophy, lost to much of Europe, survived here, translated, studied and passed forward. Physicians, mathematicians and astronomers worked in the same cities, often the same courts. It wasn't perfect harmony. There were hierarchies, taxes and tensions between communities. Historians still debate how peaceful this coexistence truly was. And the unity at the top was fragile too. In 1031, the Caliphate of Córdoba tore itself apart in civil war, splintering Al-Andalus into dozens of smaller competing kingdoms known as taifas. Even this golden age was built as much on power struggles as it was on scholarship. But by the standards of the era, Al-Andalus had still produced something rare: sustained cultural exchange instead of pure conquest. Meanwhile, in the north, small Christian kingdoms had never fully accepted the loss of the peninsula. Slowly and for centuries they began pushing south. Historians call this long, grinding process the Reconquista. Not a single war, but nearly 800 years of shifting borders, alliances and betrayals between Christian and Muslim rulers who sometimes fought each other and sometimes fought their own. By the late 1400s, only one Muslim kingdom remained, Granada, and what happened to Granada would collide with something else entirely, a gamble that was about to make Spain the most powerful nation on earth. In January of 1492, the armies of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile entered Granada. The last Muslim kingdom in Western Europe surrendered without a final battle. Nearly 8 centuries after Guadalete, the Reconquista was over. For Spain's new Catholic monarchs, this felt like destiny fulfilling itself. But 1492 wasn't finished with Spain yet. That same year, Ferdinand and Isabella signed the Alhambra Decree, expelling Spain's Jewish population unless they converted, a devastating human cost behind the crown's triumph, forcing tens of thousands from the only homeland many had ever known. And in that same year, the same monarchs financed a Genoese navigator with an unproven theory about reaching Asia by sailing west. His name was Christopher Columbus. He didn't find Asia, he found a continent Europe didn't know existed. Remember that Roman warning, "No land lies beyond"? Spain's rulers did too. Emperor Charles V later adopted a new royal motto stamped onto coins that would circulate the globe, plus ultra. Further beyond, the ancient boundary of the known world had just been erased by the same country that once stood at its edge. Spanish conquistadors would go on to topple the Aztec and Inca empires within decades, and silver from the Americas would make Spain the wealthiest power in Europe. That triumph came at a staggering human cost. Millions of indigenous people across the Americas died in the decades that followed, from violence, forced labour and diseases carried unknowingly from Europe, against which they had no immunity. Entire societies that had thrived for centuries were shattered within a single lifetime. The empire that erased Rome's boundary of the edge of the world did so by devastating the people who already lived beyond it. But immense wealth built on distant conquest carries a hidden weakness, and that weakness was about to catch up with Spain in ways almost no one in 1492 could have predicted. By the mid-1500s, Spain controlled territory on every inhabited continent. Silver from mines like Potosi, in modern-day Bolivia, flowed across the Atlantic in fleets so valuable that other European powers built entire strategies around raiding them. In the Pacific, Spanish galleons sailed once a year between Manila and Mexico, linking Asia, the Americas and Europe into a single trade network for the first time in history. It's often said that this was the empire on which the sun never set, because somewhere within it, it was always daytime. It should have been the foundation of unstoppable power. Instead, it became a trap. That flood of silver triggered devastating inflation across Spain. Prices for basic goods, bread, cloth, tools, climbed faster than wages ever could, and ordinary Spanish artisans and farmers found their savings worth less every year, even as their king was richer than any monarch in Europe. In towns across Castile, families who had once bought bread with a handful of coins found the same coins buying less every season, then less again the season after. Wealth pouring into Spain from across the ocean while it grew harder, not easier, to fill a kitchen table. Spanish industry, unable to compete with cheaper foreign goods, withered. The crown borrowed against future silver shipments so often that Spain defaulted on its debts multiple times within a single century. The global superpower, functionally bankrupt again and again. Then came military overreach. In 1588, the Spanish Armada, over 100 ships sent to invade England, was scattered by storms and English ships along the way home. Thousands of sailors drowned or were shipwrecked off the coasts of Scotland and Ireland, far from any battlefield. It was a slow, grinding disaster, not a single dramatic defeat, and it shattered Spain's image of invincibility at sea. From there, the retreat became a pattern. Portugal broke away and restored its independence. Across the Atlantic, a new generation of colonists, many of them born in the Americas and never having set foot in Spain, began to see themselves as something other than Spanish. By the early 1800s, one territory after another declared independence, until almost nothing remained of Spain's mainland American empire. Then, in 1898, after a brief and one-sided war with the United States, Spain lost its last major colonies, Cuba and the Philippines, and Spanish soldiers came home from a war their country had never truly been prepared to win. The empire that had once erased the edge of the world was now retreating from it, piece by piece, decade after decade. And the deepest wound wasn't coming from outside Spain at all. It was about to come from within. By the 1930s, Spain was a nation fractured along nearly every possible line. Monarchists against republicans, the church against secularists, landowners against labourers, and competing visions of what Spain should even be. In 1936, those fractures broke into open war. It didn't divide Spain along a single front line. It divided towns, workplaces, and often families. Brothers who had grown up under the same roof found themselves in opposing armies. Neighbours who had known each other for decades informed on one another, or disappeared overnight and were never spoken of again. For many Spanish families, the war wasn't something that happened to their country. It was something that happened at their own dinner table. The Spanish Civil War pitted the democratically elected Republican government against nationalist forces led by General Francisco Franco. It became a proving ground for the ideologies about to collide across the rest of Europe, with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy backing Franco, and the Soviet Union backing the Republic, while democracies like Britain and France largely stood aside. The human cost was staggering. Historians estimate several 100,000 Spaniards died in the fighting and the repression that followed, and the war left scars, political, social and personal, that would not heal for generations. By 1939, Franco had won. He ruled Spain as a dictator for the next 36 years, censoring, imprisoning and executing political opponents, while the rest of Western Europe rebuilt itself into modern democracies. For nearly 4 decades, the country that once stood at the edge of the known world found itself at the edge of Europe's political map too, isolated, closed off, waiting. But dictatorships built on one man rarely outlast him, and what came after Franco's death would decide once and for all what kind of nation Spain would finally choose to be. Francisco Franco died in 1975. What followed defied almost every expectation. Instead of collapsing into renewed conflict, Spain chose a different path, a peaceful transition to democracy, a new constitution in 1978, and free elections for the first time in over 40 years. By 1986, the same country that had spent decades isolated from Europe formally joined the European community. The nation that once believed it stood at the world's ending had, once again, found something beyond it. That old Roman warning, "No land lies beyond," was never really about geography. It was about the limits people believed define them. Spain has spent 2,000 years proving those limits wrong, conquered and unconquered, fractured and reunified, isolated and then, finally, open again. Somewhere south of Gibraltar, the strait that once marked the end of the world still carries ships every single day, proof that the edge Rome carved into stone was never an ending at all. It was only ever a beginning waiting to be crossed. So this is the real story of Spain, not postcards and paella, but a land invaded and reinvented again and again, a Roman province, a Visigothic kingdom, the intellectual heart of medieval Europe, the empire that shattered the boundaries of the known world, and a nation that survived its own worst war to become the democracy it is today. Rome once carved a warning into stone, certain nothing lay beyond it. Spain spent 2,000 years proving that the edge of the map is never the edge of the story. And if you think Spain's story was intense, wait until you see what happened when its empire collided with another rising power on the other side.